There's a hidden dimension to the hideous war and humanitarian catastrophe that's unfolding in Gaza right now. And it's one that not a lot of people know about. It has to do with biblical prophecy, red cows, and the apocalypse. And the astrology of the coming month is sending worrying signals that the deeply strange story I'm going to tell you is about to take a dramatic turn. I've known about this stuff for a while now, and I resisted talking about it on the channel because it just sounds so damn crazy. But mainstream media in the US is now reporting on it too, and so we're going to dive in. The war in Gaza began with the Hamas attack of October 7th, which came just days before a solar eclipse at 21 degrees of Libra. That eclipse was very close to the ascendant of the state of Israel, which is at 23 Libra. But the eclipse was visible over the United States, indicating that the US was also going to be heavily implicated. And it was, because the US and Israel are very close allies. The US funds Israel, and both countries' reputations have been seriously affected by Israel's brutal conduct of this war. And the war could well affect this year's US election, pushing many young Democratic voters away from supporting Joe Biden due to his long-standing and continuing support for Israel. But there were other weirder dimensions to what happened in October. In the March forecast episode on this channel, I said I thought we might be seeing the beginnings of a kind of holy war unfolding in the Middle East. And some people raised eyebrows at that. After all, isn't this conflict about land, money, and power? Well, in part, yes, of course it is. But there are deeper, hidden dimensions to it, and they're spiritual dimensions. Because the reality is that there are some Jews and Christians who believe that the return of the Jews to Israel was a necessary step to bringing about nothing less than the end times. And Hamas, needless to say, very much aware of this too. On October the 26th last year, in an interview on Egyptian television, the former head of Hamas in Gaza, Khalid Mashal, said that their attack on October the 7th was necessary to prevent Israel's scheme to, quote, import 5 red cows from the United States of America to implement the Zionist plan to destroy the Al-Aqsa in the shortest possible period, end quote. But what on earth could red cows have to do with the Al-Aqsa Mosque? And why would anyone want to destroy one of the most holy sites for Islam in the world? If you're getting something out of this video, then please do hit that like button and let YouTube and me know that, and subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss future episodes. The Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem is the 3rd holiest site in Islam. And so it goes without saying that it's of enormous importance to Palestinians and to Muslims around the world. But the mosque sits on what is to the Jews the Temple Mount, a location they believe was the site of their first and second temples, central places of worship for the ancient Israelites. The second temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, and the idea of rebuilding the temple has been a sacred and core belief in Orthodox Judaism ever since. But there's disagreement within the faith of what that really means and what needs to happen before it can be done. But crucially, some Orthodox Jews believe that physically building that third temple will usher in a messianic age, one in which the Messiah will arrive, Jews will reconnect fully with God, and ultimately redeem the whole of mankind. And many evangelical Christians also want the temple to be built to bring forth the apocalypse and the second coming of Christ. That's why so many of them in the US are fervent supporters of the state of Israel. But there's a big obstacle in the way of these plans, and that's the fact that the Al-Aqsa Mosque sits on the site of the planned third temple. And so destroying this most sacred of mosques would have to be part of those plans. And of course, it's hard to overestimate the level of outrage that destroying Al-Aqsa would create for Muslims across the world and the ferocity of the response. But of course, it's unlikely that even the most committed zealots would be so obviously provocative as to just demolish the mosque. There are suggestions that excavations taking place under the site of Al-Aqsa are intended to weaken its foundations, and that cracks are appearing in the structure of the mosque, and that Israeli authorities are allegedly refusing to allow work to repair it. So regardless of how bonkers all this sounds to you and me, this is a plan that could eventually usher in a conflagration of biblical proportions. Now, it's important to make clear that there are countless Jews, Orthodox or otherwise, and Christians who do not in any way support these plans. But unfortunately, the influence of those who do seems to be growing in Israel. And here's where the red heifers come in. The book of Numbers of the Hebrew Bible states that to build the third temple, Israel must sacrifice, quote, a red heifer without defect or blemish and that has never been under a yoke. This perfect red cow then has to be burned and the ashes mixed with water. This water can then be used to purify the Jews who will rebuild and work in the third temple. But every hair on this cow needs to be red, and to find such a specimen is incredibly difficult. But things have recently taken a turn because a Christian farmer from Texas named Byron Stinson has come up with not one, but 5 supposedly unblemished red heifers. And in September 2022, they were shipped to Israel.
Caring for them on an Israeli settlement in the West Bank is Yitzhak Mamo.
So we have here, after a long research, we find in Texas.
In Texas?
Yeah, Texas, United States of America.
Texas Red Angus, flying them 7,000 miles to Israel.
According to this report from CBS, a massive altar has already been constructed to conduct this ritual.
A massive altar already awaits, where the heifers are to be burned.
Special priests have been identified and trained to perform it, and land overlooking the Temple Mount on the Mount of Olives has been purchased especially for the ritual.
According to those working on the project, the ceremony of the red heifer needs to be performed on the Mount of Olives and in a place that would have looked directly into where the temple stood. The land I'm standing on, bought 12 years ago, fits both of those standards. They plan to invite everyone to the red heifer ceremony that may take place in Passover 2024.
Passover comes next month in April, and April is a month with some very dramatic looking astrology. Next month, we'll see a second solar eclipse in 6 months that will be visible over the United States. We saw how the Libra eclipse in October 2023 came at the time of the Hamas attack in Israel. The next one will take place on April the 8th in the sign of Aries, which is ruled by Mars, the war planet. And here are the paths of these 2 eclipses. Their paths cross and seem to mark a spot, the state of Texas. Now, at a more literally mundane level, we've talked on this channel about how Texas has been ground zero for tensions in the US between states and the federal government over the theme of migration. But it's also where the 5 red heifers came from. And as we've seen, Hamas leaders have explicitly cited the arrival of these cows as justifying their attack on October the 7th at the time of the Libra eclipse. Next month, we'll see this second eclipse at 19 Aries. It will be taking place quite close to the descendant of the Israel chart, and it will exactly oppose Venus at 19 degrees of Libra in this chart for Palestine. But there's more going on. The eclipse will be ruled by Mars, which will be conjunct Saturn in Pisces. That's a malefic configuration that makes me think of the theme of holy war, among other things. And we also have Jupiter, planet of faith, and Uranus, planet of shocks and the unusual and unexpected, conjoining in Taurus. Taurus gives us vividly the image of the bull or the cow. And Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions have come at times of explosions of violence or liberatory energy in the past. We saw one in 1775, 1789, 1914, and most recently in 2010 and 11 when the Arab Spring began. The other thing to bear in mind about eclipses in mundane astrology is that while we generally see events close to the time that they occur, they're also harbingers of longer-term changes that unfold over many months or years. According to Claudius Ptolemy, a solar eclipse is in effect for 1 year for every hour that it lasts. The April eclipse is expected to last for around 2.5 hours, so it will be in effect for around the next 2.5 years. So keep an eye out for news about the red heifer ceremony over the next month or two. It may fly under the radar, but ultimately turn out to be the most significant thing that happens in April or soon afterwards. I'll be back very soon on this channel for the April forecast, where we'll go into the astrology of the month in depth. So be well, and I'll hopefully see you again very soon. And if you can't wait a few days, then check out this channel's 2024 forecast video, where we covered much of the astrology of April already. Thanks, and see you next time.